Hello, everyone. I'm Jaclyn Luongo. I am so excited about this web chat today. We are going to talk about the power of before and after photos. And I am here with Jeff Spanos, not only an amazing colleague, but a very dear friend. And how cool is it that we get to work together and do this web chat, Jeff? Welcome.
Ab- Absolutely amazing.
So pumped to have you here. Tell the audience a little bit about your background within owning Shaun Charles Med Spa, and your practice was recently trained last year with threads and so much more. So please share.
I guess the best way to talk about, my husband and I, Shaun, we own and operate Shaun Charles Med Spa. Shaun has been in aesthetics for 19 years, 19 whole years, starting off as an esthetician. And, currently his most recent degree is, he is a psych NP. So
Hmm.
he's been there, he's gone through it all. My journey was a little bit different. I have an engineering background. Shaun convinced me to join our business 6 years ago. I said, "Are you crazy? Um, what am I going to do?" uh,
Right.
but,
But it makes sense to why you get so nerdy about devices
yeah,
and
I, I,
the
I,
energy part of it. Yeah,
I,
you are
I do
fascinating
joke.
to talk to about.
I do joke. I say, and it's really not a joke. I understand devices probably better than anyone else. I actually understand what the power throughput should be. When laser reps come in, they typically don't know the questions that I have the answers for, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But when it comes to devices in the medical aesthetic space, I really take that into my, I really fold that into what it is that we do. So with that being said, we've in the last 6 years we've experienced quite a bit of success, um, primarily with non-ablative energy transfer devices. Just to name a few, Neogen PSI nitrogen plasma energy delivery,
Hmm.
cell sound ultrasonic magnetic resonance delivery. We're huge fans of Cyton's BBL, and we have a new device coming. We've won 6 national aesthetic awards, including Best Aesthetic Practice in 2024 and 2025. We won a Global Plasma Award in 2023. We have actually traveled the world. We have patients that travel the world to come see us, and that's every week, every day. And I was speaking with Jaclyn earlier. We've had the blessing of training, over 50 plastic surgeons and med spas over the last 2 years. So, no, we're super excited, for this chat.
Awesome. Thank you. And what really prompted this was, of course, I see your posts on social media. It is a wow factor. That is where you got recognized for Neogen from the beginning, and now you've got these awards, the marketing piece of it. But before we started recording, you said something that really stuck with me just now. And it's not just about training this on whatever you might be training on. So, those medical providers out there, it's also how you're executing the promotion of it and
Yeah.
showing those before and after. So, take us through that journey a bit. And then I do have specific questions I want to ask. But before you said press record and you were saying that, let's capture that now. Yes.
Yeah. So ultimately, I just think, when it comes to, showcasing your before and afters, whatever they may be, and we'll go over the standard of that in a bit, I'm sure. But really, I think what underscores that first and foremost is relationship. So you have a relationship with your patient. So when I
Mhm.
go in and I do a training for, say, Dr. Smith in Arizona, and he's a plastic surgeon and he doesn't know why his practice is struggling, oftentimes I find that patient coordination, that piece of it that's linked to the social media portion, that's lacking. So, for example, I tell him, I say, listen, when a patient comes into your practice, it's like a date, right? So we're on a
Mhm.
date. And listen, if we have a good date, we're gonna have a second date. And if we have a
Mhm.
second date and it's really amazing, we're gonna have a third date. So every single time that you have your patient come through your doors, I really feel like you should treat it as such. Now, some practices, and I think this is where we could get into trouble. Treat it like, let's go to third base right away. I'm going to
Right,
sign you
right,
up for
right.
our membership program. I'm going to get you hooked up to this,
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
this package deal and all this stuff. And I'm not saying that there isn't time for that somewhere along the line, but what I'm saying is, especially that first visit, you really want to treat it like a date. And I think when you
Hmm.
do that and you're there for the patient, you establish the foundation of a relationship they feel cared for. So later on down the line, as you're documenting their progress through the wonderful treatments that you offer, when you ask for that consent, you're probably going to get it. You're probably going to get the consent to show those photos because you have that trust and that relationship established.
Such a great point when it comes to developing the trust. And it's sort of that slow and steady. And we talk about that from a thread perspective all of the time with patients, and there is building blocks to it. But that is such a great point to you can't just go straight to sign these consent forms. You hardly know each other yet. You don't know where it's going to go. So I love that you brought that up, but I also think it is for us the most powerful way to show results, the simplicity of the usability of whatever device we're talking about, our glow pin, our threads, our products. So it does start with that. And I love that lead with that in a way because you are here for the long game and you're here for that results driven journey. And that takes time for sure.
You know,
Oh, you froze for a second.
that any of our practices offer. Anything that we're offering, there's a simple, I argue to the ends of the earth with my different skincare, medical grade skincare lines all the time. And I love them. We have 7 of them. And, any one of those 7 would love to be our only line. And I always say, you just quite frankly don't have all the stuff. But here's the cool thing about it. They can
Mm-hmm.
use, 2 things from Skin Better, 1 thing from Zio, 2 things from Jan Marini, and something else from, Plated. And they're very, very happy. So in that vein, I think when people are selecting treatments and services, or you're helping guide them towards those treatments, it's exactly that. It might be
Mm-hmm.
injectables today, an energy-based machine tomorrow, PDO Max lifting threads, to really seal the deal. So,
Love those.
being able to, create that with the patient, as well is also important through that relationship.
Yeah, and having all of those layers to offer. So, from the starting point, when it comes to getting that perfect before and after photo, tell us your must haves, your process, and how frequently you are getting the photos and, documenting that journey.
So that's a great question, Jaclyn. I document everything. And, I would start by what are you using to capture your before and afters with? Now, I have a little bit of a confession to make. So when I first got into this industry, coming in as kind of an outsider, I mean, we had owned our business for a long time, but I was still an outsider coming in.
Yeah.
I was just like anyone else looking at social media and looking at, different practices. And a lot of what I was seeing was, not great to me because a lot of the before and afters had like, blurry photos, or,
Mm-hmm.
there was no, comparison that I couldn't see the whole face. And, I probably shouldn't say this, but oftentimes I would see like the blocked out eyes to hide the
Mm-hmm.
identity. And, learning what I've learned, and I know this, and what it comes down to is that people don't always want to put their identity out there. But here's my advice. If somebody doesn't want to give you full consent to use their before and after photo and they want to hide their identity, then don't run it. How about that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because what it is they just don't want to be, recognized. But what it reads as is they're embarrassed that they
Mm-hmm.
had
Mm-hmm.
treatment,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so we don't want to send that message. So first part of your question is your device. Okay, so what are you using to capture pictures on? It's a lot easier than you think. So I'm a big fan of the Samsung Galaxy Ultra line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for The Samsung Galaxy Ultra 25 and soon to be 26 actually have 8K capability.
Mm-hmm.
36 megapixel, like, if you were to get a digital camera that could do what this phone could do, it's like $25,000. I don't know if you're aware of that, but so really what you want to do is you don't even need to have a plan. You could just go buy, say a Galaxy 24 Ultra from a few years
Yeah.
ago for $100, $200,
Mhm.
and hook it up to your Wi-Fi and then encrypt it. So there's HIPAA, right? You leave that in your follow-up room, and guess what? That's all that device is used for, is just photos. Second part of your question is how often are you capturing photos? Is probably every single time the patient comes in is a great practice. And the reason for that is even before they've done anything, we need to know what we were at baseline, right?
Yeah.
We need to know during their specific treatment journey, what the short term after was and what the long term after was.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
have to know what the symbiosis between the treatments were. Geez, I really like that combination. Things that would be normally lost. I also want to, absolutely underscore that photos are a small part of it. The other
Mm-hmm.
small part of it is journaling. So I encourage my patients to journal after treatment, not every day, but if they're looking in the mirror and they're just saying, geez, I really love this now about my face, let's just kind of jot that down so that when they
Yes.
come in, they can tell me this and I can kind of draw a direct line between the last treatment we did. Of course, we can see the photos to support that, but this is what she's talking about. She feels heard. He feels heard.
Mm,
And then we can, that'll help inform us on the decisions to roll in the future.
absolutely. And there, it's also a great point to bring up that you are also sharing this journey with your patient where they are seeing from 6 months ago to now. And it's good validation and to continue those building blocks because I think it's sometimes we forget where we started from. And it's a wonderful reminder. The proof is there of
Mhm.
that difference. And I certainly concur about the Samsung because I have seen it take pictures personally of the best example is the moon that you can literally take pictures and see so up it's so clear and crisp. My daughter has one, so that's how I personally can speak to that. And what a brilliant idea to just have a device that's dedicated specifically for those before and afters. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's almost by happenstance because what it comes down to is, and I would say this is, you know, I did start off looking at digital cameras,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually had a buddy of mine that said, "You're wasting your time." He said, "Look at the," and I think at the time it was like, the Samsung from 6 years ago. And he says, I want you to look at the specs on, the best quality tier of the phone at the time. And then I want you to compare it to some of the digital cameras that are out there. And I did exactly that. And I said, wow, these camera phones have come a long way. But, one thing that also helps is that they are so digital ready. You can really,
Mm-hmm.
convert files really quickly to an email format. You can send them back to your
Great
EMR.
idea.
You can keep them
Mm-hmm.
in house. Again, HIPAA compliance is very, very important. So you want to make sure that you're encrypted end to end, and you want to make sure, especially if you're asking for, consenting and that sort of thing. Everything has to be contained in your EMR. But it just turns out that that electronic device is made for that.
Brilliant, brilliant. And so, next level, let's talk about lighting. And are you doing it all in the same space in that room that you're talking about? Tell us
Well,
a
so
little
basically,
bit about
so this
of
is
those
this
steps.
so this is a great question. So, throughout our med spa, we have, the what I call the most second most hellacious lighting there is. It's diffused LED overhead lighting. That's the second
Hmm.
worst lighting you have. At first I'm like, my goodness, the worst is fluorescent, right?
Absolutely.
And I
Yes.
thought to myself, initially when we moved in and we're renovating this place, I said, geez, we should change that. And I said, no, we're not going to change that. And I'll tell you why, because this is the lighting that people are experiencing in their day to day in their workplace and every building they walk into. So let's
Hmm.
have lighting that mimics that. So I think that that's truly important, is to have a lighting format that mimics that. So To be specific, the lighting that I'm talking about, diffused LED overhead, is probably found in about 60% of businesses now. And you'll find that in a few years, it'll probably be like 80 or 90% because it's so much cheaper cost wise than fluorescent even is, which is a very good thing because fluorescent is the worst, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody looks good. Of course, with halogen lighting face forward, everyone looks amazing.
Of
But,
course.
it's not what it is. What it is it's diffused LED overhead. And
Yeah.
if you have flaws, it will show it. So yes, so we use the same positioning for our photos. We use the same device for our photos. And we use the same positioning. Now that's another little tiny piece I wanted to talk about. And it may seem small, but it's not. So when you are centering your pictures together in a side-by-side format, whether they be at a 45, a 90, or head on, right?
Yeah.
So oftentimes, if you're dealing with, and I'll just be transparent. So I deal with Pick Stitch as an app that you can download from Apple, the Apple Store or the or Google Play. And basically, the reason why I chose that stitching app is because it's lossless. And why that's important is some of these stitching apps, when you put a 4K image in, you get a 1080p image out
Mm.
or less. So that's a problem because when you really want to zoom in on that image, you're not seeing, what you were seeing with that high quality photo that you were putting in. So it's very
Yeah.
important to have
Good.
an app that's lossless.
Mm-hmm.
So in that vein, when you are stitching them together, oftentimes, whether it's pinch to zoom, click to zoom, make sure the heads are the same size.
Great point. Mm-hmm.
Same
Mm-hmm.
positioning. I know it seems like a small thing, but I've seen some before and afters where the head is way over here and the head is
Mm-hmm.
huge over here, and it just doesn't look great. Now, let's
Great.
face it. Sometimes a patient, we had a gentleman fly to us from Australia for treatment. He's not coming back for follow up. Okay, he's sending me a photo. Okay? I told him, hey, can we just have somebody take a picture of you against some, diffused LED overhead? He sends me this picture and it's like wild. You know what? I'm going to put them together. Because here's the
Yeah.
thing, this guy is invested in sending us. So we had a husband and wife fly to us from Riverside, California last week. They gave each other one of our treatments for their 10-year wedding anniversary and flew to us to get treatment. They're not going to come
Great
back.
gift. Yeah.
And I said, you know what? Just, and I always give them the same guideline. Other housekeeping points about good quality before and afters is I always tell our patients, if possible, can we do makeup free coming in?
Mm-hmm.
Because it would just be great to see you with no makeup on, see you as fresh faced as you were before treatment,
Yes.
and then we can go from there. Guess what? I tell 1,000 patients that, and percentage show up with makeup on.
We
I'll
show
still
up with a little tinted moisturizer on, maybe Jeff, or something.
This one
That's
woman's like,
raw.
she's like, I
That's
got the tinted moisturizer on. I'm like, no, I think we've got a little more than that on. And you can, but really what you start with is I never start a comparison before and after ever thinking about, geez, this would be great for social media. And I
mm-hmm.
think that that's been a key to my success because
Interesting.
I always started with, I want to see actually what the result was from the series or the single or the whatever treatment, because
Mm-hmm.
I need to be held accountable to that patient. So maybe a little out of order here, but make sure your head size is the same. Make sure your lighting is the same. Make sure they're boxed in the same. So just to
Really?
segue from this really quickly for a
Yeah.
moment, because this brings up a great point for me. Um, if you're not doing the before and afters with your patients, in some practices, what they'll do is they'll, accept, quite a bit of money from a patient and they won't book them for a follow-up. And I guess before we started doing our trainings, I thought that was very rare, but it's actually not very rare at all. It's actually the
Mm-hmm.
norm. So, think about it for a second. When you are offering a complimentary follow-up, you're just
Mm-hmm.
coming back to me. I'm not going to charge you anything. Well, why do you want me to come back? Because I want to be held accountable for the treatment that we
Mm-hmm.
did. I
Mm-hmm.
want to be held accountable. You spent money with us, and I want to make sure that we're moving. Also, post treatment, it helps you to identify if there's anything that that patient's doing topically that could be hindering or helping the treatment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So with my follow-ups, I say, now we're going to get some homework,
Yeah.
when you leave here. And they're like, but they love that interaction. So that's another little piece of it is make sure you're actually scheduling these follow-ups, whether it be through your patient coordinators or providers in general.
Makes so much sense. And I feel like there is so much opportunity at that point to check in on it, get that validation, and also plan next steps. Because, like you said, it's that rapport, it's that relationship. And there might be something that needs to shift, and it can be something simple, but it's also, keeping them in that door. And I love that you lead with the patient is number one. All of
Yeah.
this is, extra in so many ways when they're willing to share, when they are coming back for their follow-ups, and when those results are social media worthy. And the posts
Yeah.
that you post, they certainly are, and they're very frequent, they're very often, obviously, with everything that you have and that Shaun and the team is providing. So that leads us to ethically posting and these photos that we're seeing out there, no filter, like that,
Yeah.
all of those pieces that are really important because now I think, especially with AI, there has been gray areas now to is that for real? Or can you talk a little bit about that and just
Oh, I
how
could talk.
important it is? Because we
I could.
don't
I
want
could.
to lose trust because of AI.
Well, I could talk a whole lot about it. So, certainly. So I despise AI in the social media help realm. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not, let's talk about what you're actually talking about. Say a practice that would actually use AI to augment an after photo. Well, that's just disgusting. That's tantamount to theft, in
Yep.
my opinion. And quite frankly, I just think that you're setting yourself up for a serious problem if you do
Mm-hmm.
that. Number
Yeah.
three, I don't even know how you do that because here's the thing. So think about it for a second. If you have a patient that's going to give you consent, such to say in our case, like give me consent to share their photos on our social media platform, which is robust, right? A couple things
Mm-hmm.
needs to happen. Number one, they got to agree that that was, the best treatment they ever did, whatever it was. Number two, they have to get over the hump of putting themselves out there on social
Right.
media.
Yeah.
So they get a copy. Every one of our patients get a copy of their before and after that they really have to sign off on for that. But just to dive back into your question, no, I think it's a dangerous business. In fact, at Shaun Charles Med Spa, I don't use AI for anything, for any of our
Mm-hmm.
marketing. I find it to be kind of vomitous in that space. It's a lack of creativity. There are so many wonderfully creative providers out there, and I would challenge any one of you that may be listening to this podcast to do one quick thing, right? When you have a minute, click on an Instagram, right? And go to any AI video that you would see, whether it be, I think that I was looking at one earlier. It was a cat, but it was a jello mold, but it was a cat. And I would urge you to look into the comments really quick. Just click into the comments.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're going to see is you're going to see, stop it with the AI stuff. Oh,
Yep.
this AI crap has got to go. Stop it with all this AI. And it's thousands and thousands of comments. So what's bewildering to me
Mm-hmm.
is knowing this. We know this, right? Because we are these people that make these comments. Why would a medical aesthetic practice choose, consciously to use AI when they know how, repulsive it is to most people and they can spot it a mile away? I don't like trends. I don't like the Barbie in the box with all her tools
No,
behind
no,
her.
no.
I
Right,
don't want
right.
the character with
Absolutely.
all the tools. I don't. There's certain stuff, and So in that vein, just to go back quickly, and I think the question was how to not erode trust and how to
Yeah.
not overpromise when it comes to some of these before and afters. Look, this is what it is. Shaun
Yeah.
Charles Med Spa has been posting new patients, 4 to 6 times a week, every week for the last 6 years.
Yeah.
So if you do the math, that's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of patients, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those patients aren't, particularly a person, but we have posted, all different Fitzpatrick types, all different nationalities, male, female, you name it, of
Mm-hmm.
all age, gender and size, obviously. What that piece that you asked about is it is really communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when they come in for a consult and they're coming in and they're pointing to that photo that you posted last week, it's very, very important that you tell them, because it may be may sound obvious, but that's a different person, right? Right.
Yeah.
Do you think, this is the next question, I can get her
Mhm.
results? And the answer is well, it's subjective. Maybe,
Mhm.
maybe, maybe not, maybe definitely. But what we need to do is we need to deep dive into that. So this is the relationship initiation, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's not a question that's answered immediately. It is a, let's bring you in, let's go over your complete history and find out what your goals are and where you'd like to be, and then draw a line of where you're going to be. I always go back to this girl came in and she booked a filler appointment with Shaun for her lips, and she whips out a picture of Kylie Jenner. And I said, so those aren't her lips, and they're not yours either. I just want to be very
Mhm.
clear. And I think those of us that know, especially in this industry, the best kind of augmentation, right, is the augmentation that borderlines correction, you know,
Mhm.
because dermal filler really was meant to correct, not to augment, wasn't it now?
Mhm.
So if we're
Mhm.
restoring lost volume, that's one conversation. If we are, super augmenting, that's another. So we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but to answer your question, to not erode trust with the patient, you really want to have that conversation with them, and the relationship needs to be linked to their questions of whether or
Mhm.
not they can achieve those goals.
Absolutely. So it's setting that expectation. It's being
Yeah.
compliant by
Mhm.
using real photos,
Yeah.
everything, all the rules that you just shared. And
Mhm.
then the expectation is realistic after that because you are setting that tone from the start. And I think that also is when patients themselves are really even more happy than could be imagined because you are taking all of those steps and they're seeing it in reality. They are
Well,
truly seeing it.
you just reminded me of something that's really important, actually. So, do you know? So, some of our treatments, like if we're talking about our nitrogen plasma skin regeneration,
Mhm.
most results don't show, until the fourth through 6 month, and start
Shaun
showing.
just did my multi-threads. That is regenerative.
So
Yeah.
when it comes to that point, right? What's awesome, and remember earlier you said, well, geez, how often do you take photos? So what's really cool is if you're taking photos all the time, what's going to happen is you're going to like take these photos that you're like, geez, I would never post these, right?
Mhm.
However, if you go back to baseline and then you do 3 months out, and then you do
Mhm.
6 months out, and then you do, like, my God, you can actually see how we got to 9 months out. So
Yes.
it's nice to have all of that in the arsenal, if you will, to show that realistic progression slowly over time. And I
Absolutely.
love that. I think that's the best. And another little pro tip here, because I hate it, and I just have to say it. So if you are not showing an entire face, or neck, or whatever it is that you're showcasing, an entire body part in your before and after, maybe don't show that comparison.
Mhm.
If you have to draw arrows to the after to show where the improvement was, well, maybe that's not good enough to be a before and after. Just a couple of
Absolutely.
things here. I really think that this,
Mhm.
and in closing on this little, to put a bow on it, I'll tell you. So I had this patient. Her name is Janet, and we treated her, 6 years ago when we had started with this new technology, and our expectations were pretty low, but she was invested in the process. She did everything that we had asked her to do, and so then she comes back a couple months later, and I can tell you, her before and afters were some of the best before and afters I had ever seen in my life at that time. So I am like overwhelmed with excitement. And I said, Janet, I said, hey, I said, if you'll give me consent to use your photos, I'll block out your eyes. Remember, this is when I first started doing this. And
Yes, yes.
she goes, block out my eyes. She goes, hand out my phone number. She goes, this is the best treatment I ever did in my life. And she goes, and I just want people to know this. So I was taken aback by that. And I said, Janet is absolutely right. She is so
Mhm.
proud of this treatment that she's willing to have me hand her phone number out. Well, I think that's what that says. When you're not covering someone's identity, I
You're
made a
proud.
promise. I made a promise to myself there. I said, never would Shaun Charles Med Spa ever have altered photos ever in any way,
Mhm.
blocking out eyes, or
Yeah.
restricting body parts. We were just going to show, the full people before and
It's your
after.
advertisement of what you're doing. Be proud from both ends. And I love that as a patient myself there from Shaun Charles Med Spa. And I love the idea of how we have progressed into treatments that I've even done on a personal level. And there's something to say about the photo isn't the full story either.
Mm-mm.
So with social media, share a bit of that where you're storytelling, someone's coming in with these deep concerns and
Yeah.
you're improving lives. That's what I love about this industry. That is really the passion that I have when you see the difference that you make, and you guys certainly do with how you change lives and people's confidence.
Well, and I think we'll touch on this at the very end. I'm going to give a quick preview. So, we want to talk at some point about med spa, right?
Yes.
Meets wellness clinic. We want to talk, relationship versus
Mhm.
regeneration, right? And we'll get into that. But there's so many places I could go with this, but I'll tell you, we have a new technology that's coming. I'll just say that. So we are crazy over here at Shaun Charles Med Spa. So my husband and I, we like to do like patients and process in-house clinical trials, 500
Mhm.
patients over time. And, so I've literally been teasing this device for 11 weeks now on social media. Just know that we would never release anything until we felt like we were number one experts with it, and number two we could achieve high quality results. And for that you just need to have many patients going through the mix. And I won't give you any kind of previews on what it is, but what I will tell you is it is something that acts a little quicker than other
Mhm.
technologies. So I have this woman, she came in and her concerns were unbelievable. She had a lot of skin damage. She was fully,
Mhm.
one of those patients that would, the iodine and the baby oil in the sun. And, she said, I always felt like there was no hope for me. And, so we started working with this patient and we've done, other treatments with her, but we've got her skin to a pretty good place. And so finally I said, we've got you to a pretty good place. Lorna, I'd love for you, and I can say her name because I do have full consents. Lorna, I would love for you to try this new device because, you're the perfect patient. I just want to
Mhm.
see. She comes in, we treat her. She leaves with her daughter. Her daughter was excited. She came in. This is real. So her daughter calls me. They went to lunch after she was treated here. And she says, Jeff, I know this is impossible. And I'm just telling you, I'm sitting across from my mother right now. And, just to let you know, her daughter is a doctor, right? So just to clear that up. And she says, and as we're eating lunch, I'm literally watching her skin kind of change right before my very eyes. And I know I'm not crazy. So I wish I could tell you more of the full story and what this technology is, but soon you'll know. And I said, yeah, but she stopped me and she started crying. And she said, I can see my beautiful mother
Oh,
staring right back at me. So this emotional piece, certainly for her daughter,
yes.
and the mother's crying, and like this piece, right? This is why we do what we do. All right.
Hmm.
We need to remember it's correction, right? We need to
Yes.
remember that this why people walk into a medical aesthetic practice to begin with is they want better for themselves. They
Hmm.
want, to restore what it is that was once lost.
Yes.
Confidence is for a lot of people connected to their external appearance.
Hmm.
And we take that very, very seriously. But when I get a phone call like that, it just verifies that number one, we're on the right track, but number two,
Yes.
underscores why we're in business, to begin with.
Absolutely. And very much trusted because that is why we do what we do. And Shaun has even been spotlighted from a thread standpoint as a thread provider as well for PDO Max. And the lives that are changed with what we do with integrity, with not overproducing in any sort of way, that's where this industry is sustainable. And I think we could just lead right into that last piece of this conversation, which is how we are finally seeing the synergy of skin and or aesthetics and that more aesthetic medicine really working together and working in sync versus against. And our COO, our CEO, Geo, always says your skin, the optimal skin health that you're in is where you're going to get the best benefit from
Oh,
whatever you're doing, from a facelift to a thread procedure to energy devices, all of it. So without one, you don't have the other. And I think we have finally found this spot where we're working together with maintenance at home with amazing skincare, incredible ingredients, and then the results are even getting better because of everything that we're able to work with together. And I'm going to bring up Melissa because I just think it's amazing to have the complement of an esthetician that is mentored by medical providers as well as just having the passion for skin. And that's her lane and she stays in it, but she's able to have this all of these amazing tools and be able to bounce off of it to her patients and her clients to go see Shaun for this and that, and vice versa. And that's where I
well,
found practices be so successful.
well, I'm going to brag. I'm also going to brag about Melissa for a second here.
Yes.
She's a 24-year-old esthetician that I would put against any professional in the
Mm-hmm.
industry nationwide. She's a National Aesthetic Award winner at age of 24.
Yep.
She knows her stuff, but it's like I tell our daughter, Sean and I, we have a 20-year-old, and when she used to ask me, I just the math thing, I said, the reason why you're terrible at math is you have no interest in it.
Yep.
I said, the reason why you're so good at English is because you're actually interested in it. Well, Melissa is really, really interested in aesthetics. So, we were blessed to have her join our team. She has augmented us in so many different ways. To underscore what you're saying is there's so many different places I could go with this, but just to go back to PDO Max specifically, I'm a huge fan of different modalities in this industry more than others. I'm
Mm-hmm.
very opinionated and I don't mind sharing those opinions. But when it comes to biostem, right, when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
something that is going to initiate a natural response, right, there is nothing better, okay, in my humble opinion, to achieve that end that you're looking for. The
Mm-hmm.
safe, concise way to achieve that lift or volumization that is not temporary, that is working with your body's natural process to actually achieve long-standing results with subsequent treatment is second to none. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, I'm not against dermal fillers. I would never be, but what I would say is we have to be really, really careful when it comes to HA based dermal fillers. As a
Mm-hmm.
skin booster, I'm all about it. I think
Yeah.
that nothing can, aid in that superficial fill like a skin booster can. But
Mm-hmm.
when you start to plump up certain areas with, HA based dermal filler, and it being, hydrophilic, it may decide to draw 10 times the amount of water to that area from your
Mm-hmm.
system. It's not just swelling, and pretty soon you end up looking augmented, really augmented. And we've
Yes.
crossed the line from correction, natural correction, into something else. So
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to,
Love it.
these biostimulatory treatments, they
Mm-hmm.
are a rock solid cornerstone of what is and what will be in the future. They are a big
Mm-hmm.
part, and they're as big a part as biologics in this industry.
Yep.
I think a lot of, and here's where I become opinionated, I think a lot of energy based devices will start to fall away as we roll forward.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
right now, 90% of the devices on the market are ablative or damaging. And the way they work
Mm-hmm.
is really simple. They damage your skin, you'll heal, I hope. And, you
Lots of
know,
downtime too. That's the
lots of
other,
downtime, risk of infection. How about underlying autoimmune response? I'm going to share this tiny story. When I
yeah.
first joined our practice 6 years ago, there was a woman that came in and she said to me, hey, I'm just here. I want to see what you have to offer. And she kind of liked Sean and myself. I think it was my second day on the job. And she had told us this story, and she had gone to a plastics, a couple months prior, and she had had, CO2 fractional over 3 areas of her body, her face, neck, and chest. And, halfway through the consult, she pulls the wig off and she says, "Look, I'm going to level with you guys." She's like, "I healed, but, about a month after my treatment, all of the hair fell out everywhere on my body."
Wow.
And she's a very good friend of ours. So, and I also have consent to share the story. Um, so what happened is she had some diagnosed, undisclosed autoimmune, right? And so her immune system killed all of her hair follicles
Mm-hmm.
um, quite rapidly, and the hair never grew back. So um, I would propose that any one of us have the potential for that. We
Mm-hmm.
just don't know, biologically speaking. So to
Mm-hmm.
be honest, that freaked me out, and I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't stop thinking about it. And I said, if there's even a risk that one patient could end up that way, I'm not sure I want to take that risk. So that really is what started my journey and Shaun's journey on looking for alternatives. And now I can tell you that there are that small pie slice a few years ago that was, energy based, non-ablative, non-damaging, type of technology has grown.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And eventually, that will kind of be all there is, along with, biologics and natural biostem.
Yeah.
People want natural, it's no mystery to you guys. People are coming in droves to have their dermal filler dissolved. It's just happening now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
You
that's
know,
really where, as we are educating more specifically on threads, we're leading with the conversation about biostimulation and your own collagenase producing, your own fibroblast producing because a thread has been placed.
and
And that is where we're seeing those more natural results by
exactly.
far.
And
Yeah.
I can tell you, let's just be very, very transparent. Most people that come in for a correction, there's a reason why they're there. Our job is to find out what the reason is. For a
Mhm.
lot of them, they just, quite frankly, it doesn't matter. They might be the best candidate for surgery there is. They do not want to have surgery. So guess what? That's off the table for them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now what do you do? So when I have a patient that comes in and they say, I really want surgical-like results. Well, I'm not going to ablative energy-based device. I'm going to
Mhm.
PDO Max. If you want to lift, okay,
Yeah.
short of
Yeah.
surgery, really you're going to find the best quality threads on the market, and you're going to do, a treatment today and maybe a series of treatments to get
Mhm.
those long-standing results that'll last and achieve, very close to what you want, or maybe even exceed that goal.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
um, but yeah, to touch on what you were saying earlier, I do believe, and again, I want to highlight, yes, I'm opinionated, but the FDA just came out against fractionalized microneedling. That's a
Yes.
fact.
Yes.
I have it on good authority. The next thing they're coming out against is CO2 fractional. So the writing is on the wall. People are coming in, having their filler dissolved. Energy-based devices, if they're damaging, come with risks. And now,
Mhm.
it's becoming
Mhm.
more and more difficult to operate them. And, what I would say is the med spa model is kind of dying, right? And it's not, maybe not anything anybody wants to hear, but the great news is it's transformative. So I
Yeah.
believe that as the med spa starts to die, the recovery, the wellness clinic starts to rise, right?
Mhm.
So you think about it, if you have your wellness clinic, you can do all the stuff you could do in your med spa, but you're taking a look at the holistic being. We're
Mhm.
going back to the point where we're taking, not only their aesthetic concerns, into consideration, but we're trying to really pair them up with things that work with their body's natural process, which is just
Mhm.
underscoring what we were talking about before. You
Absolutely.
open up the door to patients that would never even dream of walking into one particular practice, and now knocking your door down because that's something that they can get with.
Mhm.
So I believe, time will certainly tell, but I do believe that in the future, this business is going to transform just like it's transformed already, a million
Yeah.
times over. And it doesn't really matter what we call it. I think as long as we're there to lock arms with our patients, really listen to them.
Mhm.
I don't know if we touched on it earlier, but I'll say after treatment, my patients, because I am the patient coordinator, they send me photos every
Oh,
day or
I
whatever.
know you're in constant
Um,
communication with them.
so that, to be honest with you, this is a peek behind the curtain because I am married to my business partner, Shaun, right? Normally it drives him insane. So we'll be in Hawaii, we'll be in Oahu, right? And
Yeah,
I
right.
literally have to wake up. It's great because we're on a 6 hour time delay.
Yes,
I have to wake up like, 4 or 5 hours early so I can deal with all my patients because
yes.
he's like, and I want to avoid the conversation. So, well, we should just hire somebody.
Right.
I don't want to give that piece away. What I want is I
I
want to have
understand that.
my fingers on the pulse of what's going on with our patients
Hmm.
because it's a great opportunity to be there for them,
Yeah,
and to answer their
absolutely.
questions. And, who knows, I'll end this little piece with this. I had an 89-year-old woman call me a week and a half ago. This actually happens all the time. And she called me. I don't even know what we were talking about for an hour and a half, but I have this thing where like, I am never going to rush somebody off the phone if they want to talk. We talked about her grandkids. Her dog is very sick.
Mhm.
I need an update because he's very sick. She was giving him the medicine with the dropper and the whole thing.
Yes.
But anyway, she may never book an appointment. You know that she may never come in. But here's the thing: maybe her daughter will, right?
Hmm.
Or maybe
Hmm.
her neighbor will, or maybe Shaun Charles Med Spa will just be on her lips, on her mind. And
Hmm.
eventually, because of that, paying it forward with that attitude of abundance, I think, you know, all of us will reap the benefit of taking that time and making that small sacrifice.
Absolutely. And I think that that integrity there makes our industry as a whole be better and do better. And you are both great examples of that. And I can speak to that personally because I've known you guys for almost 20 years. So I think that that's something that
Yeah.
with the industry we've evolved, and I'm so proud to see that growth. I believe in everything that you guys do, and why I thought this would be a really valuable chat because of your knowledge and your expertise. And that's the other piece that I think is important to share here is that you have said a few times you want to be expert at XYZ. And I think that's what has happened in the industry where we're great at all these different things, but not really in that lane of expert at a few of those pieces. And that's really where your before and after shine. They're specific to these things that you stick with. And it's the same thing with PDO Max, with the products that we are representing and who we are really what we're building that community of the estheticians, of those practitioners that truly believe in everything that you've shared from biostimulation to slow and steady to regenerative, because we're seeing so much more patients coming in for just even microneedling with skin boosters and the benefit of that because
Mind
that's
blowing.
valuing down the road when they do need those more advanced services. And so it all is falling into place. And I love that you're saying the industry is transformative because it's changed since I became an esthetician in 1999. And I love this evolution because I do think that we are going back to the need of what makes you feel good. And
Well,
it doesn't have to be augmented, like you said, it's enhancements.
I'll also quickly say, when it comes to ablative or damaging treatments, there is one
Mhm.
exception in my mind, and that is, collagen induction therapy, microneedling,
Mhm.
just as a treatment, because, and simply put, surgical, grade steel metal needles that have no
Mhm.
element and
Yeah.
really, really clean channels to be able to use
Simple.
biostim is second to none.
Yes.
Also, I would augment every piece of your practice is so important. So, just like you need those highly educated medical professionals, right? If you don't have those, fantastic, educated, time honored estheticians that really, let's face it, guys, we're a med spa because we have the estheticians that know
Yes.
skin better than most, right?
Yes. Yes.
And know how to improve the quality of skin. So they are so important. Estheticians, medical professionals,
Yeah.
nurses, nurse practitioners, your doctors. You need your social media person in house, your patient coordinator, your business manager,
Mhm.
everybody
Mhm.
firing on the same the same chain, if you will.
Yeah.
And when all of those pieces communicate with one another, you have something that's really epic, I think, in this industry. There is no one piece that's more important than the other. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
secret, is I think that when we elevate all of our pieces together, we all get to the best place. And Shaun and I call that the attitude of abundance.
Yes.
Right. And I would just say this,
Great
you ever
attitude.
notice when, you have an attitude of abundance per se, all of a sudden there's more than enough, right? And there always will be more than enough.
Mm-hmm.
The inverse of that is when you adopt an attitude of scarcity or famine, now all of a sudden there may not be enough. And quite frankly, there
Mm-hmm.
isn't.
Right, right.
So it's more than just point of view, it's a way of life, and part of that attitude of abundance is calling your fellow practice and saying, hey, I saw the coolest thing you guys posted the other day,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just
Mm-hmm.
in awe. And I just want to let you know, awesome job, guys. Thank you.
Right.
Good night. I love you. How about that? In this industry, that might open up the channel for them to call you when
Mm-hmm.
they need something, or you can start that relationship. Let's face it, none of us are experts in everything. And,
Mm-mm.
just like I had said, Shaun and I have done traveling and training, 50 different practices over 2 years. You know how much we learned at those 50 different practices of things we never seen before that we were like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
that collaboration is greatly needed now more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe a good time to call, that other practice and just tell them, hey, I have my own practice, but I'm a major fan of
Love
yours.
seeing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think there is a difference. And as mentors, as educators, we're not leading with gatekeeping at all. We're the opposite end, which in my opinion has always been the most rewarding part of this industry and what
Yeah.
I feel is my why. And I certainly know that it's yours. And I know that it's Shaun's because of everywhere you're traveling and what you're training. And you're not gatekeeping to any of that. The fact that we are able to get on this, be transparent, talk about all those tips and tricks, it just makes our industry stronger. And the patients that were afraid to step in the doors at these med spas and see practitioners down the road are not going to be because, like you said, it's that synergy of the stepping stones and not going from 1 to 60.
You don't have to copy anyone else. I'll just tell you this. I would ask
Yeah.
yourself a simple question. As a business owner, as a social media professional, I would ask yourself one simple question. What is it about your advertising? What is it about your content that's causing people to, maybe call into work sick, to drive down to your practice to find out, what it is all about, right? And if
Right.
we don't have that, then maybe we should, show some of us show a little bit more courage. Again, we don't have to copy anyone. You are so wonderfully creative. Nobody thinks just like you do, and
Mhm.
you can produce stuff that nobody's ever seen before if you just trust and believe that you can.
Mhm.
That's where it starts. And we learn from that from each other, and that's how
Mhm.
we all get better, I think. So I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And you are quite humble, Jeff, because I feel as though that power of the before and afters and what you're doing in with the patients and marketing is just another level. It's so elevated that I do feel people are looking, practices are looking at what you are doing because of how you're executing it. And I couldn't think of anybody better to have this success and wish even more growth and continued success for you guys and for us as a whole as an industry. I appreciate all the support you've done over the years for myself and any company I've ever worked with. And Shaun to the same. I'm very, very grateful for that. And I'm so happy for the next chapters. And I can't wait to hear about this new device that you're not telling me much about, but maybe we'll have to do a part two.
Yeah, well, I definitely be open to that. So,
Cool.
with that being said, thank you so much for having me on. This has been awesome. I'd be totally down for part two. I feel like we've just scratched the surface, and
Totally.
I can give you an update on my 89-year-old patient, because I am going to call her after this. I need to
Right.
talking to her. And that's what it is with these relationships, right? I need to call her and find out where we're at.
Right, right, right. And how's the dog?
It's all I could think about from this entire rest of this, web chat is
Yeah.
how is Helen's dog doing? My God.
Oh,
Anyway, but anyway, thank you so much.
thank you, Jeff. It was such a pleasure.
Awesome.